Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a Saturday morning here in Tampa, Florida. It is chilly. Now, I'm not going to look for sympathy from anybody who is freezing in the snow up north. I'm not looking for sympathy, but as Florida goes, 50 degrees is winter time. I'm excited. I've got a lot to cover this morning. And have a fantastic guest to introduce to you in a different way than you're familiar with her. But first, I just want to welcome our friends in the European time zones, including Lambros Stravalakis from Athens, Greece, Tekanis, Kalimera. I'm excited that we've got so many people from around the world that follow this trial, that have joined this channel. It's just fantastic that we've got so many people dialed in from the UK, from Greece, from South Africa. And it's chilly in Oklahoma too. I do not doubt. 2 a.m. Beck Edwards, 2 a.m. in Australia. I did not think I would get anybody from Oceania to join us, but I guess there's night owls everywhere. So very excited to have this crowd and to be able to put it on first thing in the morning here. Missy Didi Moo, it's dialed in from Australia. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to host this at a different hour so that we could honor the folks from Emmy is from New Zealand here. Again, 3 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing up? And what are you doing up watching this? Well, it was an exciting day yesterday. And in a moment, I'm going to bring in a fantastic friend, someone that I just met in October. And that's Jules, the Notorious Jules, the Pro-Plaintiff Jules, who went from relative obscurity, although she has been a TikTok influencer for a while. I don't think Jules expected the stage that she was given thanks to Shapiro and friends. So we'll be talking to Jules and find out who she is. I mean, all we really know about her now is who Shapiro and Hunter have painted her out to be. And I will tell you that I've gotten to know her over the last couple of months, and she's an amazing, amazing woman. And I'm really excited about introducing her to you today. We'll get to that in a moment. But again, just wanted to say welcome, thank you. Thank you to the mods, including Gothic Brina, who is up early in the morning. She's in the Pacific Northwest. And I know that Lynn is still recovering from her shoulder surgery, but I know that she's joining us early in the morning, as is Calypsis. So very excited about having the crew rise and shine, rise and grind. Let me bring in my friend, my guest, the Notorious Jules. Good morning, Jules. Jules, I can't hear you. Don't tell me it's going to be one of these days.
I don't know what I did.
Oh, I can hear you now. Fantastic. Welcome back. Jules, I heard you briefly.
Hi.
There you are. There you are. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you this morning, and how are things on the Gulf Coast?
Good morning. How are you, and how is everybody in the chat?
It looks like everybody's cold. Ellie Cat 81 from Kentucky, where it's 3 degrees and snow covered. It's well, let me see. Beth says it's 11 Fahrenheit here in my part of Oklahoma. So the 50 degrees that we have here on Florida's West Coast, let's not complain too loud. But I've got the Mr. Rogers cardigan on today because it's chilly outside. Jules, I think you may be catching the delay. Are you out there? If you can, flip over to StreamYard, because I think you're a couple seconds behind me.
I do.
So, Jules, let me just get to the big news of the day. Came out yesterday, and as Scott from Recovery Addict has already read through, and I know Rob.
I'm having what?
Oh, we lost Jules. She'll be back. But the big news that came out yesterday is that after the orders were entered on Tuesday by Judge Carroll, there was a fairly rapid exchange of information. There were two things outstanding. First was they had to decide how they were going to offset the $2.5 million out-of-court settlement that the Kowalskis had with Dr. Sally Smith and her employer. And that was decided very quickly. Both sides agreed. The other was whether or not the Kowalski family would accept the remitter reductions in the total jury award. If you remember, the jury awarded $261 million total, $211 million in compensatory damages, $50 million in punitive. If you have gone through the judge's order from Tuesday morning, through the remitter process, he adjusted those downward so that the total amount was reduced. Well, I want to say 213 million. And so the plaintiffs accepted those, and Jules actually has may have some insight about how that happened, but it happened very quickly. And what that allowed for was for the judge to enter a final judgment. And that came out yesterday, late in the day. And this is an important document because it changes the calculus substantially. It really flips the field. Okay. So what this does, and I apologize, I thought that I would be able to show this on screen, but I'm learning, but I'm not that sophisticated, yet. We'll get there. But what this does is the order walks through. It's a 4-page document. It walks through a 6-page document. What the case was about, and then it talks about the findings of the jury. And again, just like the 17-page order that Judge Carroll put out on Tuesday, this is a very strong embrace and endorsement, and a thank you for the jury doing a great job. And I know that Yoli and presumably Paul, juror 1 and his wife, as they've come to be known, they are in the audience, and maybe we'll hear from them during our live stream. But I will tell you that this is an endorsement of what the jury did, and shows respect for what the jury sat through, distilled, and decided. So at the bottom line, if you scan forward to page 4, the meat of this is that it finalizes the judgment of $140,784,000 awarded to Maya. It finalizes the judgment of $1,513,500 to Jack for specific issues, and further it formalizes for Jack as personal representative of Beata's estate, which includes the award for Kyle, $66,153,676. My physician math, I was not a math major, but my physician math brings that out to $208,451,176 that the jury award has been reduced to, but now the judge has entered final judgment. What's interesting about that is not only does it commit that judgment as the final number, it also starts the clock. It's almost certain that Johns Hopkins, Old Children's Hospital, Johns Hopkins Health Systems will appeal the verdict. Almost certain. It also will, but it changes the math, because for every day that they spend challenging the outcome, it will cost them $51,771.14 in interest. Let me read that again. $51,771.14 in interest every single day, Saturdays and Sundays and holidays included. So if this goes on for 18 months, you're talking about a substantial interest payment. What this also does is it requires Johns Hopkins to put up a bond to cover the award, and to cover the award potentially with 18 months worth of interest factored in. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's $1.5 million a month, rounded off. So it's about $18 million in interest. No, it's, goodness, do the math, Joe. 9, 18, 20. It's $27 million in interest if they appeal this for 18 months. So bottom line is that they have to put up a bond to cover $50 million of the judgment plus $27 million in interest. So that $77 million bond, if they were to go to a corporate bail bondsman, would cost them almost $8 million as an expense, as a purchase. Okay. So for the last 5+ years, it has been in Johns Hopkins Old Children's Hospital's best interests and Hill Ward Henderson's best interests to drag this out. They have had the upper hand because they had all the money. They were fighting David in the form of the Kowalski family and Greg Anderson and his team. And their strategy could have included, speculating here, wear them down and bankrupt them so that they have to give up the fight. So now the advantage is lessened because there's a cost to the delay, a cost of $51,771.14 every single day, including Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. So when the hospital administrators get to the office on Monday morning, they'll already be 6 figures IOU on interest. That's why this was a big day yesterday. This was a big deal. And so I want everybody to understand what the final judgment means and how it changes the math, and why it's such a big deal. Now, I was able to swap messages yesterday with Jack. My dear friend Jules actually had a chance to talk with Jack at least once, if I'm not mistaken, more than once, Jules. So without breaching any confidence, without breaching any friendship trusts, how are Jack and Kyle and Maya doing? And how did they respond to this big deal yesterday.
I did speak with them. I had a conversation. They are relieved because now this is the next step of moving forward.
Can you speak a little louder, please, Jules?
Sure. Is this better?
Mm.
No?
You have to use your theater voice.
I could hear me really loud and clear.
Okay.
You have
Maybe it's my end.
Let me see. Maybe
You know what? It's probably me, Jules. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You're good. So tell us about the conversations, if you can.
Okay. Can everybody in the chat hear me?
Yes. You're good
okay.
now.
They're relieved. This is the next step, moving forward. And they can start living their life now. You know what I mean? They were living for so many years under a microscope, and it was not good. But they're in a good place. They've always been in a good place, and I do want to address one thing, Dr. Joe. I did not know Kowalskis prior to this trial. They're
Jules?
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, we lost you. You said that you didn't know the Kowalskis before this trial, and then I lost you.
No, I did not.
They are an eminently likable family. I mean, I've said earlier, to know them is to love them. And especially in light of all that they've been through and all that they have persevered through.
That's an understatement, Dr. Joe. I mean, this family has been through the mill. It's been the one thing about them is that they held strong. They did everything as a family. All their choices that were made, they made as a family unit. My hats are off to this family.
For sure. For sure. And again, I think that seeing their, I have described and continue to describe Maya's testimony in early October as showing strength, poise, and tenacity, characteristics that I believe she probably inherited from her mom. But really, that applies to all three of them. Kyle is such a smart kid, a poised kid, and he is a kid, right? I mean, he's 15, 16 years old. And he's been through, nearly as much as Maya has. And he's been through everything that Jack has been through too, he's a great kid. Maya's remarkable. I mean, so smart and so grown up beyond her years. And Jack, Jack's that quiet hero. I mean, remember, he used to run into burning buildings, right? He used to do CPR and keep people alive until he could get them to the hospital, right? He's a guy that, you actually shared a story with me about what he does in his neighborhood, that I think really kind of tells the story of who Jack is. Would you mind sharing that now, if you can?
Um, I think I can. I don't think that Jack will mind me sharing this. It's really not like a big secret, but he helps his neighborhood. Um, Anybody that needs something done, whether they need a door fixed or, something breaks, or they call Jack, and Jack goes and he does the work for his neighbors. He helps his neighbors. Um, that's the incredible spirit of Jack Kowalski. And unfortunately, during this process, he had to take a step back from that. And this was something that, he was looking forward to getting back to. Um, he's an incredible individual. And I learned that more so um, after the trial. Like I said, I did not know this family prior to the trial. I didn't even get to know them until when Maya's teacher testified. That is the first time I had an interaction with Maya out in the hall after her teacher's testimony, and there was Jack and Kyle leaning up against the wall, and I looked and I was like, "You look like you need a hug," and he's like, "I do," and this is a very welcoming family, Dr. Joe. They welcome everyone. It is what it is. Now I can't hear Dr. Joe.
Sorry, I muted during a coughing fit.
Okay.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, they're a remarkable family, incredibly approachable and incredibly humble, and I can understand that, given all that they've been through. I'm sure this has been a very grounding, humbling experience. But I am really encouraged by all that they have talked about, what they want to do. I think that this tragedy that they've suffered through has given them a new purpose. That I'm sure that they will successfully execute on. Because what happened to this family should never happen to anybody else, for sure. So Jules, let me flip. I know that you don't like to talk about yourself, but I don't know if you recall our first conversation. Um, I met you and Cake Lady Alicia in the courtroom on a Monday morning. It was the first time that I'd ever been in that courtroom, and I just went in. I was not testifying. I just wanted to kind of feel the room because I knew that when I came back on Wednesday to testify, it was going to be a very different environment. And you and Alicia were just two ladies in the gallery, who were incredibly friendly and said hello to everybody and what have you. And it wasn't until I got home that evening, and my wife, the gregarious Greek goddess herself, had been watching the live stream on Recovery Addict with Scott, and you had phoned in and given him a report about what was taking place. And so when I got home, my wife said you were sitting next to an internet star. And so when I got back to the courtroom on Wednesday morning, in the lead into my first testimony, I leaned over and I said, I had no idea I was sitting next to somebody who was famous. So is that why you went there?
No, Dr. Joe, that is such a fallacy. No, I mean, I that's so crazy. I mean, there are so many rumors out there. No, I went there because let me give you a back history here. First off, I'm an avid trial watcher. Okay, I've been to several trials, criminal, but this was my first civil trial. Um, I read a story on the Herald Tribune, Sarasota Herald Tribune, and it was on the Kowalski family. This was years ago, and I thought this is a crazy story, and I couldn't believe that a hospital uh, would behave this way. So it went by the wayside. Then when the case was filed, I looked into it and said, "Oh, this isn't going anywhere. There's no way this trial is going to go anywhere." And I didn't watch again. I wasn't following up. Then in the spring, it came to my attention. This is actually going to trial, and it's a 30-minute drive for me. I'm going. And so I went. I sat on the defense side because, again, I didn't have all the facts of the case. And I thought, I couldn't believe, what I was reading in newspapers or online. But I started out on the defense side. And shortly thereafter, I moved across the aisle. I had to. I mean, it was there. The evidence was coming out more and more, and that's how I ended up there. It wasn't to become notorious, as Ethan Shapiro referred to me. Um, I was doing this on my own for my own knowledge. And yes, was I putting it on my TikTok? I absolutely was. There were people that were interested in this case. Um, so I'm sorry, but that's how that's how it went. And then I found out that Rob from Law and Lumber was doing recaps that night, and I was in his chat, just chatting and giving my observations. And then people in Law and Lumber were like, "You have to go to RA." And I was like, "Who's RA?" I had no earthly idea. That's how I started with RA and calling. Um, would I do this again? I'm not sure, because the defense really, in the end, hammered me. And there's a internet website out there that threw out so many uh, a false narrative and speculations on who I was and what I was, and yeah, so I don't know, but that's how it started.
You know, so I will tell you that I assumed that you and RA Scott at Recovery Addict had been working together for a very long time. I'm very surprised to hear that you actually A, didn't have a prior relationship, and B, got sent there from the Law and Lumber crowd. That's interesting. The way that you called in, the way that he connected with you. Number one, Scott's one of the nicest guys on the planet, right? You've met him, I've met him. He's just a terrifically nice, helpful guy. I would not be doing this without his help. He's been a great mentor and coach. But I assumed that the two of you had been working together forever.
No, I didn't know who he was. No, I had no idea who Scott was. I mean, when everybody in Rob's chat kept telling me to go there, and call, I had people private message me and say, "Here's the number, and call." And So I did. I guess someone gave Scott a heads up I was going to be doing it, and I don't know. It just snowballed after that, because Dr. Joe, what you see on the TV and what we actually saw inside the courtroom was two different things. I mean, people did not see the interaction of the attorneys on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
It was very eye-opening for me.
I think it's interesting that you talk about that you sat on the defense side to start, right? First of all, I think it's funny that it's like a wedding. Are you with the bride or with the groom? Right? And that actually became part of the defense's animosity towards you, right? Because and to Hippo Lover. They said, well, why did Yoli sit on the plaintiff side? I mean, listen, it's not that big of a courtroom, and there was only room for maybe 50 in the gallery, shoulder to shoulder, right? I mean, nothing personal, Jules. I didn't have much of a choice but to sit next to you and Alicia on that first day, because the front row was really reserved for the press. And, the folks that sat directly in front of me, they were working the cameras and the audio feed for Law and Court and everybody who picked it up after that. And then really, there were a couple of days where I sat next to a reporter from USA Today and the reporter from the Sarasota Herald Tribune. I don't think that their coverage was necessarily pro-plaintiff, but they were sitting on the plaintiff side, right? And it wasn't a problem for them, but it apparently was a problem for you. Fair or not?
That's fair. I mean, that's a fair assessment, Dr. Joe. I was crucified by a internet source that I will not name, but you know who I'm talking about. No, I did. I started unbiased in this. However, I'm not going to lie. As every day went by, I did become biased, and I became pro-plaintiff. Now, was I an agent de facto? No, gosh, no. Who? I mean, I don't know where Ethan. I mean, we do know where Ethan Shapiro got this, but no. I was not agent de facto. I wasn't spying. I wasn't doing anything. What I was doing was paying very close attention to the jury. And let's not forget, I always thought that juror number 1 was, in fact, juror number 7. I mean,
right.
Right. So, and a lot of things, some of the things that I said on Recovery Addict, not seeing me in person like you are here now, when you're doing something over the phone like that, some things can be taken out of context, and it sure was. But I don't know. I met a lot of great people, and we'll get to juror number 1 and Hippo Lover later on. Go ahead with your questions.
Well, number one, I want to say happy birthday to Kurt, Uncivil Law. And he, well, it was his birthday. I want to say on Wednesday or Thursday. So, Kurt, happy birthday to you. And isn't it great that as a birthday gift, Judge Carroll gave you not only his orders on Tuesday, but he gave you this great final judgment on Friday. So happy birthday to you, my friend. And I agree with you. We love Jules. And Matilda Hennen, good afternoon from the Netherlands. So happy to have you joining us today. But so tell me about how you kind of found yourself in the courtroom. First as an observer, because it was of interest to you, is what I just heard. But man, you got really involved really quickly, and not just with the law tube community. Um, you had a lot of connection with a lot of people in that courtroom, including other folks who drove in to spend a day in the gallery. I mean, I know that there were several CRPS patients who showed up. There were several folks who had other kind of ignored diseases that showed up, because this meant so much to people with rare diagnoses. That here was a 10-year-old girl who couldn't get heard when she went to the hospital, and this was really this was important to them, because it was important to Maya. So tell me how you went through all of that. Tell me how that evolved.
Um, well, I'm nosy to start with.
Fair enough.
I'm very friendly, as you know, and I will talk to. I will, and I love knowledge. Okay, I'm a sponge. I love to learn, and so I would talk to people on the break. And on two occasions during the trial, the day that Maya testified was one day, and then a few weeks after that, another group of, of people with CRPS came, and during the break, I got to speak with them and hear their stories, and uh, they were they were in pain, not just physical pain, but they were having emotional pain because no one would listen to them. No one would hear them. Um, they were being degraded. So they felt that Maya's story shed light on the things that they were going through. And I can empathize. I empathized with them. The day that Maya testified for the first time, her first time on the stand, that courtroom was packed, shoulder to shoulder on both sides. And I will say this, on the defense side were pro plaintiffs, because there was nowhere for them to go other than the overflow room. And on the break and at lunch, I got to meet several families, actually from the documentary, that were featured in the Take Care of Maya documentary. Um, the stories that were shared with me that day was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Um, and each one had a common denominator, and that was Sally Smith.
Hmm.
And that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. It was stunning to me. Even in the documentary, um, it was obviously a very compelling story about the Kowalski family. But what really struck me about the documentary and my visits in and out of the courtroom was how many other families have been through this that didn't have the documentation, didn't have the representation to have their story told. And so, in many ways, the Maya story was being told for um, a much broader group of people who have been through the same bruising, life-changing experience. And it's terrifying. The idea of, anything that would separate me from my kids would be devastating. My wife, my kids, they are my life. And to have that separation forced on me through false allegations, and how do you fight it? And the scary thing for me, and it was very clear in the documentary, that the fastest way to get reunited with your family was to admit to a crime that you never committed. Man, you talk about an impossible choice, right? Because that decision to capitulate and say, all right, you're right, I shouldn't have done it, that will follow you for the rest of your life, period.
I agree, Dr. Joe, 100% on that. Beata and Jack were in a no-win situation, no matter how you look at it. Unfortunately, in my opinion, these are my opinions, but the bullying tactics that were done against Beata unfortunately led to the outcome that it did. Um, you know, as a parent, you're going to say and do whatever you can to save your child. And I I I don't fault Beata. People think I'm insane because I commend her. I do commend her. Commend her till this day because this woman can finally rest in peace, knowing that her husband and her children can now move forward in their lives. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as far as Jack is concerned, listen, the rumors that are out there, they are rumors, and people need to stop speculating. Go by what you heard in court. Go by the evidence. Um, Jack was interrogated in that hospital by Ms. Graham. There is no two ways about it. Again, my opinion. When I listened to that tape, that sounded like an interrogation to me. I don't care, grown man or not, you're going to feel intimidated and you're going to say what you feel you need to say. Number one, to avoid going to jail because she certainly threatened 10 years behind bars and to get your child out of there. Um, so, you know, um, I don't know. I don't know, Dr. Joe, if you agree with me or not, on that.
Yeah. No, I could not imagine going through what these families have gone through. And again, it's one of the things that you have to love about the Kowalskis is that they had the strength and fortitude to keep fighting. One of the, again, going back to the documentary, and if anybody hasn't watched it, especially now that we're kind of in the wind down phase of this, I encourage you to watch Take Care of Maya on Netflix. But one of the most devastating scenes was, they were supposed to go to trial last April, and the when the family found out that the trial was being delayed, watching Kyle in particular break down and saying, we're never going to get to tell our story. That had me full on bawling. It was that was soul crushing to me.
Yeah.
But they kept up the fight. They kept up the fight, and I just love that. What the what the immediate reaction from Maya coming out of the courtroom was when the press asked her. She said, the best part is I feel like I've been heard. I feel like I've been heard. And there are so many advocates that are in with us today that have joined this community, who have shared their stories with me about not being heard. And that's what I adore about this jury that did its job, and they vindicated the fight, and they heard the Kowalskis. That's delivering a W.
That was that yeah, it was. And I have to commend Jack, Kyle, and Maya, because inside the courtroom they had to maintain a certain presence. They couldn't, when they heard things, they can't react, being present in in other trials. That's the first thing your attorneys tell you. Don't react, don't show anything. You have to remain stoic, whatever. So I would imagine that was very difficult for them, because I know for me, and especially my dear friend, the cake lady, Alicia, and we did not know each other prior to this trial. We became friends during the trial. She's my very bestie. But my point of this is that hearing time after time referring to Maya as that little girl. That little girl has a name. Please use her name. And it was done so disrespectfully. This pronunciation of Kowalski, it's not that hard to say, folks. But the most irritating part to me was the deliberate mispronunciation of Beata. I was very upset with that. But it wasn't even that. Maya showed such grace. Kyle held it together, and you could tell that the way when Jack would sit there, he never took his eyes off of his children, and he truly is the backbone. He was the backbone of the kids. And when there were breaks or lunch and you come out of the courtroom and you're in outside, you could see like a visible change, not just with the family, but with everyone. It's like, oh, okay, now let's take a breath.
Yeah. So, speaking of coming out of the courtroom, you had an interesting experience outside the courtroom one day when Mr. Shapiro had life advice for you. Would you care to share the details? We've heard the big picture, but would you care to share the details?
Oh, I'll definitely. Now I can. I will absolutely. I've had to keep my mouth shut for months. I will definitely share the details. First off, this did not take place outside of the courtroom. this actually took place inside the courtroom. This was right after the rebuttal case took place, just prior to closing arguments. You were in the courtroom, Dr. Joe, so you know the main aisle I'm referring to,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I'm in that main aisle. I'm speaking to Dr. Scott Richards. We're just having a how you doing conversation, nothing about the trial. You hear that we were probably about 3 feet away from the double doors, and we hear the double doors open up, and of course, instinctively, you look, and it was Ethan Shapiro. He tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Well, now that we're winding down to the end, what do you plan on doing?" And I said to him, I said, "I'm gonna live my life." Now, after he tapped me on the shoulder and said that, he turned around and started to walk to his table. And I said, "I'm gonna live my life." And when I tell you, he turned around so quick, I thought his neck was gonna snap. He said, "Yeah, get a life." And so I was stunned for like a half a second, and the only thing that popped into my head was, "Yeah, and are you going on vacation?" And then he snapped back. He goes, "Yes, I am." And I was like,
Speak to the hand.
"Whoa, yeah, that is exactly what happened." And
That's pretty funny. It's
um,
sad but funny.
yeah, it's very sad. And here's the thing, at, at yeah, but at the start of the trial, I just want you to know that out of all the defense attorneys, I liked him the most. I thought he was, um, I thought he was the kindness out of all of them. He handled Maya gently and with care, um, in the beginning. And I had conversations, not real conversations, but I spoke with him out in the hall, even Hughes, and even Carell. I spoke with Carell's in the restroom. Alicia was there, the cake lady. She'll tell you. We talked about the air conditioning. We talked about how cold it was. We asked her, does she know why the flags were at half mast? She was a very nice woman in the restroom. However, um, I was outside the day that Ethan Shapiro did an interview, and the question was asked of Ethan Shapiro, um, did you offer, was a settlement offer ever made? Okay. Kim, the reporter from, I believe she's from Fox 13. Anyway, his answer was, and it's not verbatim, but this is the gist of it. His answer was, "Oh, no, we never made an offer. We would never make an offer. We wanted this to go to trial because mandatory reporting is at stake here, not just for our hospital, but every hospital across the nation. So we will see this through the end, and we are very confident that we will win, and no settlement offer." I was appalled, Dr. Joe, because I knew otherwise. And that evening, I went home, I went through the documents, and I pulled up the most recent settlement offers that were made, two settlement offers, July 2023. He lied. He he bold-faced lied. And yes, I made a TikTok. I called him out. I even posted the settlement offer. And that's when That's when the defense team was like, "Watch her. She's
so
she's not good." And that's
so
where it all went downhill.
so take a second and tell us where you posted that. I know that you've got a social media presence. How do we
I
find you? How do we follow you?
I posted it, I posted that on my TikTok. On my TikTok, it's under blind underscore gossip. But yeah, it's there.
I'm
Um,
sorry. The name of your TikTok site is blind_gossip.
yes.
Terrific. Candace, can you put that into the chat and pin it for us just so folks who want to continue to get more Jules know where to go? Yeah, thank you very much, Reverend Beasy, sorry. Sorry for the mispronunciation. And thank you for Denise. Thanks for such great coverage and your part in bringing justice to the Kowalski family. That's very, very kind of you. It's this is a family that needed support, and I'm happy that I could have been played any part in it at all. Jules had the good tea on her TT. It's really going to be interesting to me to see what role how the lawyers line up now. Because we're entering a different phase of this entire process. Jules, I want to bring in a mutual friend now who hopefully will be able to give us some insight about, the roles of the different lawyers, because it'll be interesting. We've got Kurt, the birthday boy. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
It's nice to finally see you, Jules.
You can just call her Notorious, Kurt.
I will if she wants me to. I want to treat her. I'll treat her with respect.
Yes, I was offended. At first, I was offended with the whole Notorious thing because of Ethan Shapiro, but thanks to Kurt, my very good friend Kurt, I have learned to embrace Notorious. So thank you, Kurt.
Oh yeah, man! I get some vanity plates. I love that, man. I've been branded. This is great.
And Kurt, would you just share? I just want to share if for those of you who don't know our new guest and my good friend, Kurt is an attorney in Texas, but has argued before the Supreme Court.
I haven't actually argued before the U.S. Supreme Court, but I'm licensed. That's a rare opportunity.
Licensed. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Sorry for overselling, but Kurt can be followed at Uncivil Law. Again, one of the most prominent voices in LawTube. If you don't follow him, you should be. So thank you for joining us on short notice, and happy birthday, Kurt.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, my birthday was a week ago on the 13th, but hey, we'll celebrate every day that we're still alive, I guess, right?
Amen to that. Amen to that. So Kurt, as an attorney, I've heard your conversations, both on your own channel and in conversations with others like Rob, talking about how far outside the line you feel like some of the behavior has gotten, both during and post verdict. So, what do you think happens from here? Because we are entering the appeals phase.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Hill Ward Henderson remains at the tip of the spear, or do you think they will take a secondary role?
I would imagine they take a secondary role. I mean, we already have the appellate counsel there. They were in the courtroom conferring with the trial counsel while the trial was going on, which is not something you're used to seeing. You're not used to seeing that kind of interaction. Typically it's either the same lawyer if they want to take it through, or it's someone completely independent. And as all things go, we tend to recommend the latter route because they are different practices. The trial is about facts, so they're all about trying to prove what the facts are. So it's more it's more about personal interaction. It's also more about dealing with witnesses who sometimes can be adverse to you. It's about getting what you need. It's about dealing with the jury and trying to get them on your side. So it's a lot more about persuading a group of people to, come onto your frame of view and helping to deal with difficulties there too. Where the appeals is focused on the law. So it has a much more, at least in principle, sort of impersonal, dispassionate, analytical attitude to it. So they can be very different skill sets.
And what do you anticipate is my expectation as a non-attorney, who, as an obstetrician gynecologist in Florida, I've tried to avoid you guys like the plague, right? But
Yeah.
My assumption has been that we would go get to the judgment, which we have as of yesterday, and then we would just sit through 12 to 18 months of the appeals process.
Oh yeah, that's realistic. Under relevant Florida law, they're supposed to have the argument within 2 years within the appeal, and then the actual decision on appeal takes as long as it takes. So I imagine that we're in, and I strongly anticipate that this is going to go to the Florida Supreme Court. So I think realistically, we're 4 to 5 years before this comes to an end.
Wow. Even with $51,771.14 per day.
Yeah, I mean that's Johns Hopkins' problem on the back end of the thing. That's at the 9% interest, but they probably want to defer payment as long as they can. Also, they want to, just as a psychological. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a
Go ahead, Jules.
My question, Kurt, is this is where I have a little bit of confusion with the interest, and I'm hoping that you can clarify it. I know it's compounded daily, etc. Once it gets to, like you said, it's going to go. I agree, Kurt. It's going to the Florida Supreme Court. There's no doubt in my mind. But if the Florida Supreme Court, for some reason, knocks down. Well, first off, let me ask you this. Can the Florida Supreme Court, because we're going to assume that that's where this is going to end up, do they knock down the entire verdict, or can they cherry pick certain areas that they want to knock down and make other areas stand? That's my first question for you. And then the second question is, does all the interest that has accumulated go to the family as a whole? Or if by some slim chance, and I don't believe it's going to happen, but the Supreme Court said, nope, you're not getting anything, that interest just goes away. Sorry.
Right. So every cause of action is sort of a case unto itself. So every sort of cause of action has to be proven. So I believe there were 7 causes of action ultimately on this. There was 3 counts of false imprisonment. I think there was 2 counts of battery, 2 counts of intentional infliction of emotional distress, one with respect to the mother while she was alive, one with respect to leading up to her death. There might have been something else in there. So each of those causes of action are separate and unto themselves. So the Florida Supreme Court can deal with them all individually. And what is necessarily true of one is not necessarily true of the other. So typically when you're thinking about a case being reversed, it's because of a systematic error that infects the entire thing. So there's no way to separate it. It infects the whole thing. But as a general proposition, yeah, the Florida Supreme Court and other courts tend to, as a general proposition, they don't like to interfere with verdicts. So they want to maintain the jury's verdicts. That's sort of the status quo. So to the extent they can, they tend to like to minimalize and compartmentalize their verdicts or their decisions, their rulings, as far as they go. So if, for example, they wind up striking down the cause of action relating to the death of Maya's mother, then about half the damages disappear. As relates to the interest, of course, is by each cause because the jury awarded money for each separate cause. So the interest runs with its associated verdict. So if the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, as the case may be, winds up removing a cause of action, then all the interest relating to that cause of action would also disappear because there was never any judgment in the first place because it was legally invalid. So because there was no judgment in the first place, there's no money, and because there's no money, there's no interest. But of course, that doesn't impact other causes of action or other interests. So I hope that answers your question.
Kurt, and the systemic problem sounds like a immediate jeopardy, doesn't it?
Mm.
Sorry, just had to go back to what was familiar to me.
No problem.
What is it about this case that makes you feel so confident that this is going to the Supremes?
Well, the issue of the liability for the death of Maya's mother is a novel issue in Florida law.
Right.
And it's, generally speaking, a novel issue in all of U.S. law. There is some scattering cases that have dealt with this in small contexts. But this award in this amount is more than anyone has ever contemplated or dreamed of in this cause of action. So I think you could arguably make the case that no court has really addressed it because the stakes so far have been low where they have dealt with it. So everyone seems to be going back to this one case in California from 1970 that sort of suggests that this could be valid. But as every state is sovereign. Every state is a separate state. So the law as it relates to one state doesn't necessarily influence other states. Mm-hmm. So Florida has to figure out what the law is for itself. And there is no precedent that I can see in Florida. So the trial court is just trying to create a brand new law out of nowhere. This is what we call common law. The judge created law. The judge is just trying to create a brand new cause of action that didn't exist. It's like, I'm going to invent it right before your eyes. And so I think the likelihood is it goes to the Florida Supreme Court because, well, it's a completely novel cause of action and the amounts are so high that their interest would be piqued, I would imagine.
Yeah. And the of course the twist in this is the opportunity for mediation, which has been a dismal failure, I think, was the way that it was described in the December 15th hearing. Their previous attempts at mediation have gone less than nowhere. But again, the math changed yesterday. And I think that the interesting thing to me about the mediation was that the who's who that Judge Carroll invited, demanded, attend is profound. So again, you'll have all the decision makers in the room. What is your inside baseball assessment of the prospects for mediation?
Well, I think both sides are incentivized to mediate for kind of the same reasons. Maya's motivations to mediate are both is time, frustration, and certainty. So if Johns Hopkins were to say, I don't know, like we'll cut you collectively a $50 million check today, well, that's certainty. That's money I actually have in hand. It literally exists, right? And it saves me 5 years of frustration. Plus, even if I win, ultimately on the back end, I would imagine they are going to try to make collecting on that judgment as painful as it possible, just to try to drag things out. Because the more painful they can make it to her, the more incentive they give her to give up, or because, it's just so tiring that she can't deal with it anymore. So it takes a lot of resiliency to go through that. It takes a lot of resiliency to take it this far, and takes a lot of resiliency to take it another couple of years, plus whatever they are going to fight in actually trying to collect on these things. I forget what the numbers are, but they're actually shockingly low. Like the amount of money that's ultimately collected from actual judgments is, I forget what the number is, but it's like under 20%. It's very low, that money that actually winds up getting paid out. because of a whole combinations of reasons. So Maya's incentives is, well, just to throw out a number, I can have $50 million today. And also, Maya's lawyers are certainly as well aware as I am that the uncertainty regarding the cause of action for the mother is tenable. So take certainty. And then Johns Hopkins motivations is, well, their motivation to appeal is we can get half this to go away. Their motivation to settle is maybe we lose. And paying $100 million is better than paying $200 million. So I think both sides have the incentives to settle, but whether or not they can reach any sort of agreement is, of course, deeply questionable. So we'll see.
And if Jules, 1 second, and if it gets settled in mediation, does that mean nothing goes forward to the second DCA or to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, if they settle, it's if they settle, the case is over.
It's done. Okay.
Yeah.
Jules, you wanted to ask a question of Kurt?
Yeah, I do have a question. Kurt, are you aware that 93%, a little bit above 93% of Judge Carroll's cases have withstood the appeal process? And yes, this is a case unlike any others. In your opinion, what do you think about, do you feel that he crossed all his T's and dotted all his I's and made this appeal proof?
He certainly tried. And with respect to every cause of action other than the death of Maya's mother, I think he did. But yeah, I mean, appeals generally don't happen. There's a common saying that appeals are for losers, which is both technically true because only the loser appeals, and also because the rate of the Court of Appeals reversing is very, very low. Like in a criminal case, the rate of like a total reversal is something like 2%. So, you know, winning on appeal is by far and away the exception, not the rule, because as I sort of mentioned earlier, courts of appeal want to maintain the jury's verdict. They want to maintain the decision below. They don't really want to upset things if they don't have to. It's like, what we had all this process, you had a jury, you had all these witnesses. We really don't want to frustrate that unless we have to. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Judge Carroll has a wide acceptance rate. I'd be shocked if he didn't. But, you know, and I think, at least in my humble opinion, and I've certainly said this on my channel, I think he and also the two judges who preceded him were unduly conservative with respect to making it appeal proof, because Johns Hopkins did things that I think were worthy of being beaten over the head, and that never seemed to happen. But I think he definitely tried to make things as good as he is. So other than the possibility that the Court of Appeals might remit further, they might reduce the money further, or other than the possibility that they make the cause of action with Maya's mother's death go away, yeah, I think he pretty much made it appeal proof.
Thank you. I so was hoping Kurt was going to say that. Yeah, you know, I'm grateful for that. I also feel that I did watch Kurt's streams when it came to Paul and Yolanda before they were able to speak out, and the dastardly motions that were made by Howard Hunter and Ethan Shapiro in regards to Paul, Yolanda, and unfortunately, you know, myself. Thoughts, Kurt?
With respect to what?
What they did. I mean, was this an act of desperation on their part?
In sort of how Johns Hopkins went about the case?
After how they went about it after the verdict was reached.
Well, I don't think that with respect to how they went about it after the verdict is really different than how they handled it pretty much every stage of the way. Because some of the things that I learned just truly shocked me. As like, this doesn't make sense to my brain. They had something like 15 hearings on getting the
Yes.
iCloud data in response to 35 motions. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to the lawyer in me. The number of hearings should be about one. You know, there were 52
Yes.
there were 52 summary judgment orders. I'm like,
Yes.
the number should be about one. You know, maybe two, maybe three. But these things just went on and on and on. And at least to my mind, a substantial reason it did is because none of the judges in this case, because there were 3 different judges at different phases, were stopping Johns Hopkins. So what's their incentive to stop? It's the kid who keeps breaking the rules and their parents never punish them. So what's their incentive to stop? So their behavior of yelling and screaming and pouting and all the rest of it, no one is stopping them. So I've been sharply critical of the judges collectively, because you need to have control over your courtroom, and none of these judges did for whatever combinations they did. So I wasn't happy.
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree, and Dr. Joe, you definitely need to jump in on this. I think that Judge Carroll made every effort to control what went on inside the courtroom. Dr. Joe, you were there many days. I mean, do you agree with me that he pretty much ran a tight ship, especially when it came to Greg Anderson?
Well, I agree with you that once the trial began, he did a very smart job of managing. I think what Kurt is referring to is everything that led up to the day in court. And you don't get to 4,100 docket entries.
That's a lot of docket entries, man. That's a lot of docket entries.
That's a lot of docket entries for sure. Yeah.
Well,
I think that there will be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about I suspect that within the legal community there will be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking about how this case was managed. But I think broadly, yes, it reflects an undisciplined defense counsel that was, to your point, Kurt, was getting no pushback. So why stop the bad behavior? But I also think that I think there was a lot of initial skepticism that there was actual there was actual merit to the plaintiff's case, right? Because so many times listen, I'm an obstetrician in the state of Florida. Some of the cases that have been brought against my OBGYN colleagues are beyond ludicrous, and but it's so easy to get a settlement check and move on, right? So the legal lottery so I think that there is maybe at times a healthy skepticism about plaintiffs' claims. I don't think that anyone, including the court and including the defense counsel, was prepared for the level of documentation that backed up the claims. The level of documentation that Beata collected that was included in the documentary was mind-boggling to me. She had every note, she had every conversation. Yeah. And most plaintiffs are not going to have that. They can make the allegation, but they don't have the evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
The text messages were you understand why it took 15 hearings to get there. Those text messages were devastating. How do you say that you're there you're helping a 10-year-old kid when you're making statements like she can't keep up the charade 24/7? Right? Let's do it again so that we have the evidence for court next time, right?
Well,
those text messages were devastating, in my
yeah,
opinion. And
I agree, Dr. Joe, but here's what's even more important. I'm not even quite sure Kurt is aware of this or not. You and I are, but Ethan Shapiro and Howard Hunter were all part of the DCF
right,
case, and there is an email. I don't have the DIN number offhand, but it's there. Where the weekend, the New Year's Eve weekend of 2016, the woman Patty from Risk Management wrote an email stating that the social worker and the guardian at Lightem could not come and stay with Maya on that holiday weekend, and how Patty wasn't going to be a babysitter for her, and that it was put in that email that Howard Hunter is aware of the situation and was asked should they recontact the GAL and see what to do, and Howard Hunter said no. Leave it be. The kid can be by herself. This was literally a week before Beata did what
right.
she
Yeah.
did.
Beata died.
Why? Someone please tell me how Howard Hunter and Ethan Shapiro went from being in the DCF case, and even after Beata passed, still was fighting to have Maya removed and sent to Cincinnati. How were they part of this civil legal team?
Well, I mean, of course, as lawyers, they are obligated to zealously represent their client to the best of their ability. So their obligation, their ethical obligation and duty is to protect their client. So,
but it's a conflict of interest.
Oh, maybe it is, or maybe it's not. But I mean, that kind of thing would be fought over at a different level. So whether they should be conflicted out because of involvement with other things could obviously be an issue that's raised. And I assume that issue was raised, and I assume the judge found it to not be a conflict of interest that required disqualification. So, I mean, there's legal standards on this, as you would imagine. So
Kurt, let me ask you, Terry LeBeff asked a great question. And as an attorney, in your vigorous defense, at what point do you consider the reputation of your client? Because clearly, Hopkins has taken one in his shorts for not only for the way that they took care of Maya, but also in the outrageous behavior of that you've referred to several times in the way that they've managed this case. So what role as an attorney does your client's reputation carry?
Well, I think that's largely driven by the client, because the clients it's the client that needs to factor these in. So one of our roles is as counselor. So we inform the client to the best of our ability all the relevant trade-offs, including as it might relate to non-legal concerns such as PR, and we bring those issues. But if our client wishes to be aggressive and says to us, well, we'll let the PR people worry about PR. It's like, okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, my role here is not PR. I gave you my advice. You've made a decision. I'm going to respect your autonomy, to reflect a word that you might be more familiar with,
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to reflect your autonomy to make this decision, whether or not I think it's wise. Even if it'll kill you. Like, well, it's your decision to make, not mine. I'm not God, so okay.
Yeah. And for the folks who live in the Tampa Bay area, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital is certainly a well-known entity for pediatric care, but they're not without competition. And I brought into to my audience several weeks ago Tampa General just received I believe it was a $25 million donation from some local philanthropists for building out or raising the prominence visibility of their children's hospital. That's at Tampa General Hospital, which is right downtown, and also St. Joe's Hospital, which is a Bay Care facility, which is kind of just outside of downtown. They have a women and children's hospital, and they do fantastic care there. So, I think Hopkins, Baltimore, probably is going to be taking a look at reputational damage, because they could get crushed in terms of losing their kind of preferred status as this continues to go on and on. I think the reputational damage has been done, but I don't think it's irrecoverable yet.
Oh,
And
sure, yeah.
They need someone like Dr. Joe to go in there and clean out. Just my opinion.
The problem is, I think the most I would get at this point is a broom, right? I think they literally consider me for the environmental services crew, but not much beyond that. Nancy D asks, why haven't they taken Dr. Smith's license away? That's really a Board of Medicine issue, but I do think that she has. I think she has taken a step back. Already within the child protective team in Pinellas County. Interestingly, the state of Florida had allowed privatization of the child protective services, and that went away on the 1st of January by state law as well. So, interesting question, Nancy. But again, nothing is going to happen to her license that doesn't happen through the Florida Board of Medicine. While I'm here, I also just want to thank Charlie Lynn for gifting memberships, as well as my injured and recovering mod Lynn, 2574 for gifting memberships as well. We also have a couple of new members, including Shelley Coleman. So welcome to the advocates, as well as to Lois Cox and Nancy D. Welcome aboard. So, Kurt,
can I just talk just a second about like a little bit of what my view of the philosophy of sort of like law is here? Because I see people in chat talking about morality not the same as law. And I think that the morality overlap with law might be more than some people initially appreciate. So I sort of want to echo on what you said earlier about a lot of your colleagues that getting a lot of BS complaints. So that's a good example, because we need to balance. We need to bet what is the moral thing to do, right? So we have a person who makes a complaint against a doctor. Okay, so what is the moral thing to do? Do we how much do we protect the complainant versus how much do we protect the person who's being complained against, right? So because we want to protect the innocent, but we also want to punish the guilty. So the morality of law is the sort of the set of all cases, right? The common law tradition is a 1,000-year long tradition that has had to consider the case after case after case after case, where the morality of a particular case swings wildly one way, and then the morality of a case swings wildly the other way. So how do we balance these competing interests? And at least to my mind, the law tries and does a very good job of trying to handle the amalgamation of all cases. How do we, starting from ground zero, because ideally we want the law to be neutral. We want the law to be globally applicable. We want to apply to everything. So how do we, from first principles, without knowing anything about a particular case, how do we, from first principles, balance all the moral considerations if a patient wants to sue a doctor, for just an example? And I think the law does a better job of that than some people might appreciate. So there's some philosophy for the day.
I think, Dr. Joe, a lot of people were interested in the behind the scenes of what went on in court that they weren't able to see on screen. I don't know if you observed any things that my dear friend Alicia and I had observed that the cameras did not pick up. I want to say, as far as the plaintiff's legal team goes, they presented themselves at all times, whether the camera was on them or not, or we were on a break or lunch or whatever the case may be. Every single person that sat at that plaintiff's table was respectful to not just the judge, but they were respectful to everyone, including those in the gallery. If you stopped them to, whether it was like, good job, way to go, they were just very respectful. If something happened inside of the courtroom that caused the judge to take a 5-minute breather, they were very respectful. I wish I could say the same thing about what I observed coming from the defense side. And they did not hide their disdain when it came to certain witnesses, or even when it came to Greg Anderson, whether he was doing, direct examination or cross-examination. People at the defense table would turn around and look behind them and mouth. And if Alicia was here, she would back me up on this. Mouth some terrible things, and the foul language that was being used. Some of it was done in the presence of the judge. Most was not. I was, as a court watcher, this is, I think, my 7th trial I attended. I have never witnessed, granted it was my first civil, but still, I have never witnessed attorneys behaving that way. Dr. Joe, did you pick up on anything when you were there?
I will tell you, Jules, I did not. I wasn't there every day like you were. So you saw a lot more. And quite candidly, I was really kind of hyper focused on my role. So I didn't do as much. I didn't take in as much of the surroundings as you have shared with me in our conversations. But some of the behavior, some of the stories that you've shared were quite shocking. I personally did not see them, again, because I was there with a very specific focus.
Yeah, and and to make it very clear, there was an incident that was brought up. I believe it's in an affidavit that was submitted post-trial about Mr. Shapiro, the way he exited the courtroom, and people that weren't there. I know it's very hard to fathom, but it did happen, and he exited through the double doors, and I was directly behind him because across the double doors is a chair and a table, and it was the plaintiff's team that had a printer on that table. Well, you're not allowed to bring anything other than water into the courtroom. And I had a bottle of Pepsi hidden outside the courtroom behind that table. And so I was going out because I needed a little caffeine boost. And I was right behind him. And Alicia was behind me. And he did, in fact, say, I'm not going to repeat what he said on here because I don't want Dr. Joe's channel to get dinged. But it was an extremely derogatory statement geared towards the family. And it was so stunning and shocking to me that I did have to stop for a moment. And did I hear what I just heard? I turned behind me and I said to Alicia, did you just hear that? And she said, no. I was unaware that Connie and Gabby, who was part of the plaintiff's team, I was unaware that they heard it, and I didn't say anything. I just kept my mouth shut, leaned over. I believe it was Connie that was sitting there, leaned over her, or it might have been, it doesn't really matter, grabbed my Pepsi and watched as he stormed down the hall to the left. And I was like, this is the behavior that people that are watching the trial don't get to see from inside the courtroom. Terrible.
Well,
Terrible.
I think that, Kurt, I'd actually like you to weigh in on this. I think that Mr. Shapiro may have had a bad day. Tampa Bay Times article about the judge's orders from Tuesday. Quote, despite Tuesday's ruling, Ethan Shapiro, co-lead for All Children's, said that the hospital still plans to appeal the court's decision, quote, for as long as necessary, end quote. In a statement released Wednesday, he said the court had, quote, failed to grasp the complex medical child safety and legal issues in the case, continuing in quotes, any fair and unbiased reviews of the facts and the law in this case completely vindicates the care provided by the experts at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. Quote, it is a sad indictment of the judicial process in this case that those facts were concealed and that the law was misrepresented to the jury, end quote.
Yeah.
Do you think he wishes he could have that one back?
I'm not surprised that he said it, to be honest. I mean, it seems kind of par normal to other statements and their behavior overall. So I'm in no sense shocked by it. I feel like I should be, but they've been saying this all along. I mean, that's sort of the entire theme from the other side. They just don't get it. This is just more evidence of that. So it's just the same old thing. Yeah, we think we did nothing wrong. We think the facts show that we did everything right, and we think that you misunderstand the law. It's like, okay, well, that's a perspective, I guess.
But does he not appear to be throwing Judge Carroll under the bus here? And is that A, good idea, and B, in line with the standards for Florida attorneys?
I think it's within the rules of ethics. Yes, I mean he's just criticizing the judge for their rulings on law because that's basically what they're going to appeal on, right? He thinks that the judge got the law wrong. They're like, okay, so if he got the law wrong and presented the wrong law to the jury, that's exactly what appeals are for. Appeals are all about law, not facts. So he says, okay, the judge got the law wrong. He misunderstood Chapter 39. He misapplied it. He made bad rulings when it came to evidence. Judges make rulings all the time. Is this evidence in? Is this evidence out? Based on various rules of evidence. And so he's like, well, you think they made bad calls. I'm like, okay.
Kurt, it was the defense that wanted Chapter 39 out.
I know.
But now they're like, well, you didn't hear all of this other, you wanted it out. You got what you wanted, and now you're sorry.
Well, and I think
they wanted it all out, and the Court of Appeals disagreed with them. So I suppose they think the Court of Appeals got the law wrong. So okay.
And I think that the judge, called them out on that, about wanting their cake and eating it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of wanting it both ways, we've got Recovery Addict with us.
Hey, Recovery Addict is here.
Hey,
Kurt,
well-dressed Recovery
Joe.
Addict. Didn't you get the business casual memo, Scott?
You told me that you had all the big stars here, and I thought I'd dress up for the occasion, and here I feel overdressed. So,
well, I had invited Scott to join us, and I understood you were not going to be able to join us. So, thank you for sliding in. But I wanted to bring Scott into the conversation because in a big way, you're responsible for my famous guest Jules today.
Oh no, I found Jules, or Jules found me somehow, and it was amazing. I'm so glad that connection was made. But she says that we gave her voice, but she was our eyes, which was just wonderful. It's for somebody who's watching a court from long distance. It's a flat view. And she gave us depth and context that just wasn't available any other way. So it was wonderful. So grateful for her.
Well, awesome. You're welcome. And again, though, thank you, Scott, because you did give me a voice, and because it was in the moment, as in real time, that I was able to talk about it and not wait until I got home and, go through my notes and make my little TikTok videos. It was, and when things really got heated, or, like something really important happened, it was like, I have the outlet with Scott that I got to call right away and tell him, like, damn, guys, this is what just happened. So
it was neat. It was neat to be able to get that feedback, because a lot of times, something would happen and we'd have questions. We'd be like, oh, I wish I could see, I wish I could, be able to turn the camera and see something that's not showing right now. And you were that person for us. So being able to just almost immediately, every time there's a break, get an update, get a clarification. It was wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yeah. I love this comment. Jules was Maya's voice to us. That's great, Marianne. Well said.
I didn't, Dr. Joe, I didn't plan on that going down that road. That was not what my intention was at the start. Here's a behind the scenes story. I haven't even told Dr. Joe this, but my first meeting with Maya, I almost knocked the poor girl over. We were on a break. I was in the restroom. Done. I opened up.
Keep this safe for
I am. I was done. I opened up the stall door and barreled out. And who did I barrel right into? Was Maya Kowalskis. Her back was to me. I didn't even realize that it was Maya. And I like when I bumped into her, she went forward. I grabbed her by her shoulders. And when I looked up and she turned around, I said, I'm so sorry. And when she turned around to say, and she is as sweet as could be, she said, it's okay. You're okay. And I was like, oh my God, Maya. And she, yeah. And I was like, I am so sorry. And that was my first meeting with Maya. So, and it went from there,
Well, my first meeting with Maya was a more formal introduction, but amazing family. Maya, Jack, Kyle, just incredible individuals. Meeting them is, you do feel like they're family immediately. They're just genuine, and I don't have words for it. They're just good people, and you feel that when you're with them.
You do.
Yeah. So the burning question, Jules, is who's taller, you or Maya?
I am.
Ooh.
Maya is, as a matter of fact, we walked out of the restroom together, and Jack and Kyle were outside of the restroom waiting for her, and they were walking in front of me, and Alicia was with me, and I said to Alicia, I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that she's as tiny as she is. And Maya heard me, and she turned around and she said to me something to the effect of, do you really think I'm tiny? And I was like, tiny in a good way. Because she's tiny. I guess she gets that a lot because she's very petite. And there's a delicateness about her. But she's not delicate by any means. Okay. I'm talking about visually. She visualizes being delicate, but that young lady is articulate. She speaks her mind, and her dad did a great job. And during court breaks and when the restrooms needed to be used, I can say this firsthand. Jack and Kyle, or one or the other, depending on what was going on, always walked her to the restroom, stood outside, and waited for her to come out. Unfortunately, there was an incident in court one day. I don't think this was shown, but the defense was not being kind in their words in regards to Maya, and it did become too much for her, and she got up very quietly, very ladylike. She did not cause a scene or anything like that. She got up to exit the courtroom, as she should have, and that was her right to do so. But I saw the look on her face, and I immediately got up, and I followed her out, and she went down the hall, and I said, "Are you okay?" She was like, "Yeah, I needed a breather." And Jack and Kyle at that point, they could, when she got up, they could not. And I wanted to make sure that no one outside of the courtroom was going to bother this young lady, because there were some people that were a little. So I did that on 2 occasions. And then after that, I come to realize, you know what? She can handle herself. So whenever she had to leave, she went and took her breather, her rest, whatever. There were days where my heart broke for her. I don't know if you could see it on screen, but I certainly saw it in person, where she was exhausted. She was not feeling well. She had literally black circles here, and she tried her best to weather the courtroom. And there were days where she had to miss. And I know that there's the skeptics out there about why she wasn't there. But when Greg Anderson said she was having a flare-up, she indeed was having a flare-up due to stress. That was not a lie. And I really resent people from that other universe that I won't name, put such false things out there about this young lady. And then, and again, this is something that I haven't spoken of publicly at the time, because I didn't think it was appropriate. But I don't think that, the family will mind me saying this, because it's not a discussion I had. It's just an observation. During the entire trial, Maya was in slacks. Then finally one day, she came in with a dress on. I could not help but notice, you could see the healing lesions on her legs. And my heart, because of everything that I had heard in the course of the trial, was like, oh, goodness gracious, but here's where I give Maya all the grace in the world. She didn't hide it. She wore that dress, and she wore it well, and she wore it on a second occasion as well. And it's like, there was one night in Lawn Lumber's chat where the first day that she wore the dress, where people were bombarding me in the chat. Did you see lesions? Did you? And at that time, I said, I'm not going to discuss it, because I was appalled that this is what the focus was, that people were more interested in knowing, did she or didn't she have lesions? Why is that anyone's business, Dr. Joe?
It's not, and you were right to not answer in the moment. Again, a lot changed yesterday, right? With the judgment we're in a different phase, and we can talk more candidly. Matt Bond, thank you for your comment. Matt, I recognize Matt's illegal mumbo jumbo talkie peoples from Law and Lumber, so well familiar to the LawTube crowd. Welcome to our conversation today. And I'm sorry, Matt also shared that he's having a flare up today and how much flare ups suck. But I agree with you. Maya is a firework, big bright bag in a small package. Jack is hilarious. And I'm actually working on trying to sit down with the Kowalskis next week. Jules has been helping me to arrange that. I think that when this audience sees them outside of the courthouse, you'll get a very different feel for an amazing family. I think all of us who have had the opportunity to meet and interact with Kyle and Maya and Jack come away feeling better for the experience. They're just a really super cool family. But
they are, Dr. Joe. Yeah. And I hope that everyone, because when you do, and they are looking forward to sitting down with you. I think when everyone, that's going to be a big audience for you. I just ask for everyone to show this family grace, because for 8 years they lived their lives under a microscope. Every little thing, everywhere they went, was scrutinized, and they don't deserve it. So, I always try to put myself in someone else's shoes and what they've gone through, hear them out. And I think the best place to do that for the first time would be with Dr. Joe, because he is a gentle soul. He's a kind-hearted man, not to mention, in my opinion, he saved the day. He brought this trial to an outstanding conclusion.
You were such a great witness. I really love the way you dealt with like the cross-examination. You're just so non-flustered and just gave these great answers that weren't condescending, and they weren't fighting. They were just clear and articulate. As like it was a beautiful thing to watch.
And Kurt, how about what was your take because I was in the courtroom and I saw this with my own eyes, and I understand how some people saw it and some people didn't realize. What did you think when Dr. Joe stood for his entire cross-examination by Howard Hunter?
That was different. Why did that happen? I guess that's a good question.
Number one, I appreciate the compliments. Thank you, guys. Obviously I've never done that before, right? But I understood going in that intimidation was part of the game. And, I thought that some of the things that Howard did were a little sneaky, to say the least. Asking me about a deposition that was never taken, trying to trap me. He showed his cards early that he was going to attack. And, when he repeatedly approached me in the witness box, even Judge Carroll said, "You can step back now," right? He understood what was going on. I just thought if he was going to approach me, then I would stand to greet him, because that's the polite thing to do. You never shake anyone's hand sitting down, right? Why didn't I do it the first time? Why did I do it subsequent times? Because I didn't know what the rules were. I didn't know if I could stand up. I didn't know if that was allowed. So
I didn't know that was allowed either. So I guess we all found out.
Well, maybe that will go to the Supremes too. Who knows? But I do think that I know that he spent a lot of energy trying to have me excluded. Eliminate. What's the legal term? Something eliminate, right?
In motion and eliminate.
In motion, and I know that it's also unusual to be subjected to voir dire not once but twice when you're on the stand. So I know that he did not want me to talk, and I knew a lot of what was not going to be brought in. There's so much more to this story that the rules of law would not allow to be shared. But I thought that there were some important parts that, if the jury understood it, then I think that they would connect a lot of dots. Candidly, I was stunned when Shapiro asked not only about the Joint Commission, but then doubled down on it and said, "Are there also federal?"
That's such a thing, because I was like, if this wasn't an issue before, you've opened the door, as we say. You can't. Yeah, it's either in for everybody or it's out for everybody. You can't invite your own error. You can't ask a question. Then the other side, well, let me ask questions about the same thing. It's like that's not how that works.
In tennis, we call that an unforced error, right?
Yeah.
And that was an unforced error. But listen, I was happy to play a role. I was happy to answer the questions that were asked of me. And Greg gave me great insight when I first started working with him last February, March, April, whatever it was. And he described for me, and Kurt, you understand this better than most. He described for me the way that expert witnesses are a part of the British system, which I think is brilliant. And that is that the expert witnesses are not paid shills. They are brought into the proceedings to help inform, educate the judge and the jury. So they don't necessarily have a side. And he gave me the latitude to bring that approach to my work that he engaged with me on. He wanted me to really be more about helping call balls and strikes than to sell a perspective. And there were times, and people have pointed this out, there are times when I did not give Nick and Greg all that they asked for, right? Nick asked me about should Kathy Beattie, did her threatening behavior rise to the level of warranting getting walked out of the building? And I didn't give him that because I didn't feel that it did. So I didn't, and I said that freely. I didn't fear disappointing them because they wanted balls and strikes. And so that was a really liberating gift that they gave me at the very front end that allowed me to maintain my integrity. I never had to say anything that I thought was fringy or flat out BS. I do think that if you look at witness Anderson, he was so poorly prepared. I mean, that whole exchange and his cross-examination under Greg was just absolutely, I mean, it was a bloodbath. But that wasn't on Anderson, witness Anderson, as much as it was on the defense team, because they just they didn't prepare him. They gave him talking points. They didn't
you gotta prep your witnesses, man. You gotta prep your witnesses. That's a huge part of trial. Huge part.
That was definitely for me, and again, my seatmate Alicia, eye-opening when that door was opened in regards to that IJ report. And I will say this, shame on some of the networks that covered it, because the day that bombshell happened in the courtroom, that night on evening news and talk shows, not YouTube, not the law tube, I'm talking about our network news, the focus was on homecoming photos as opposed to the IJ report. I mean, that was the biggest out of the entire trial. For me, that was the biggest bombshell, especially when Hunter got up there and said, and I quote, "I thought I buried that Dracula years ago."
Well, you brought it up, so
Yeah.
But it was, but they were focusing on homecoming photos as opposed to this IJ report. And they only had theirself to blame for that. But, shame on our network news, our local news, because it was the local channels that were flashing these homecoming pictures instead of what's going on here with this IJ report.
It's the sensationalism of trials, which is something that also bothers me. And I think a lot of these trials, including Maya, somewhat indicates why a lot of judges are skeptical about cameras in the courtroom, because the argument for cameras in the courtroom is that we, the members of the public, have a right to see the trial and see what's happening because it's a public thing and we should be able to view it. I'm like, well, that argument makes sense. But then in reality, what tends to happen, as we saw, is like the cameras will focus on Maya unduly, and as the verdict is read, they zoom in her, hope to get that moment where she's crying or whatever. We saw the same thing in the Gwyneth Paltrow trial, where the judge was actually having to reprimand the attorneys and the camera people, and then they tried to get around the court's orders, like, stop focusing on Gwyneth Paltrow, look at the attorneys. It's like, okay. So then they just frame the shot to get them both in the shot and stuff like that. So the sensationalism of how the media deals with trials, and the fact that they're talking about homecoming is much more resonant than an IJ, which is much more technical. So it's not surprising, and it's also a little annoying. But well, that's what we have.
To your point, Kurt, being inside the courtroom, I was not aware that the cameras constantly focused on Maya. I thought the cameras were on the witness And whichever lawyer, whoever was doing direct examination or cross examination, I figured there would be certain points where the camera would pan, to Maya, Kyle, and Jack. But I did not realize, sitting inside the courtroom, that the camera constantly focused on her. And that was so wrong on so many levels.
Yeah,
that was problematic. Can I ask a couple of questions from the audience?
Yeah, sure.
So it just slid past me. Kurt, what decision making will fall to the insurance companies when it gets to mediation? How much influence can the insurance company make?
The insurance company can obviously pay up to their policy limits if they choose, which would alleviate their responsibility. So the insurance companies can pay for as much as they're responsible to pay for. That's their decision. So I can't speak to the policies. Obviously, I don't know what they are or what they contain, but that's their decision. So to the extent the insurance companies are on the hook, and to the extent that they want to pay to the policy limits, they can obviously make that decision for their own benefit.
Several guests, several in the audience. Amy L 2022. Kurt, would you please confirm that interest is not compounded and rather a simple interest calculation per the order? And also, Be Kind Tiger is asking, what kind of sanctions could be ordered, if any?
Well, I don't know whether or not the interest is compounded or not. I mean, I would assume it's compounded, and the way the order was written, it suggests it's compounded. So yeah. I would say it's probably compounded. 9% interest return isn't bad, man. I mean, give me that investing. You know what I'm saying?
I'd take that all day long, right?
Yeah. As to sanctions, the judge can kind of do a lot of things. And for example, the IJ never being produced would right. drive me insane. And the judge can issue sanctions. Now, at this stage of the proceedings, a lot of that is kind of moot. Because what can the judge really do at this point? I mean, all he can really do is fine money, as opposed to more interesting sanctions that he could do during the trial. But so I think that the sanctions, if they're granted, are going to be minimal. I'm expecting them to be not a lot of money. So I don't. Yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions that I've fielded about the IJ. Why haven't we pushed harder to get it? Yeah. And the reality is that it literally came in on the last day of the trial, prior to
it wasn't even the IJ, right? Because it was the summary of the IJ produced by someone else.
Correct, but the whole topic of the immediate jeopardy came in literally at 11:59 before the Cinderella's ball ended, right? But and we just ran out of time. Had it been allowed in earlier, I think we would have much fuller disclosure of the document.
Yeah, but the IJ and the failure to produce the IJ and the failure of sanctions, I think, is emblematic of what I was talking about earlier, with the judges 100%. Not really controlling the courtroom, especially in the run-up to things. Because, what should happen in an idealized world is the court's orders have to matter, right? Orders have to matter, and there has to be a penalty at the end of the thing, or the order is meaningless. And, the court has to enforce its own orders for its own sanity and its own power, its own reputation. Yeah. So ideally what should happen when attorneys defy the rules, of course it depends on how much they've defied in the past, and it depends on how bad this defiance is, kind of like criminal sanction, right? We tend to punish people more on how bad this thing is, and we also tend to punish them more on how bad they've been in the past, because it shows recidivism and repeating. But so the normal sort of escalation of things is normally you start off with some cautionary words, and then suddenly you're in writing, and then suddenly you're talking about monetary sanctions that sort to accumulate. And then we get into the exciting non-monetary sanctions, which can include such things as toothbrush time, wherein I send the attorneys into jail and make them think about it for a while. Or how about you just don't get to present that witness? Just out of pure sanction, just out of I'm mad at you. How about you don't get to present that witness? How about you don't get to ask that question? Or the ultimate sanction, default. how about you just lose? How about you're just done? How about directed verdict, you're just done and you just lose? And we've seen that, for example, that's what in part happened to Alex Jones. Alex Jones got default, and then the only issues were the monetary issues. So it's the thing the court can do, and it's the thing the court should do. It's a thing the court should obviously not, jump straight to the end of the page. You don't want to immediately go to the end of the page. But at some point, it's appropriate. And at least to my mind, based on the record, I understand it, I would have taken more aggressive actions long ago.
Yeah. A couple of questions for Jules. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Couple of questions. Taylor Myers asked, and I think we've addressed this. How did you get into the case, and how and why did you choose to go to the trial? I know that you addressed that earlier in the conversation, but I know the answer to this. Casey with multiple Ys asked, did you ever need to hire counsel or get legal representation after you found yourself in the thick of J. Hatch's post-trial temper tantrums?
Well, no, I did not. And I did consult. I did consult with two people. Kurt, may I? I consulted.
Yeah, she asked me how concerned she should be, and I told her there was no reason to be concerned until a subpoena came. And because there's no reason to worry about it.
Yeah. And so I did not, and I had nothing. I did nothing wrong. And while we're on that, Dr. Joe, if you will allow me to expound,
Sure.
On that, let me just say about the false narrative that was put forth during that fiasco, and we all know where that information originated from. So let me backtrack to, I believe the date was October 30th. However, I'm really not for sure. A screenshot was provided in a motion of me sitting approximately 3 feet away from a woman who I later found out that it was juror number 1, who I thought was juror number 7 at the time, was his wife. Okay. I did not know that. We sat in that position 5 to 10 minutes until my seatmate, Alicia, came. And when Alicia got there, I moved because I always sat with Alicia. Alicia was my partner. And Dr. Joe was there, and Dr. Joe can testify to that as well. We exchanged generalities, as I did with everyone that was there. So they took that screenshot and made it more nefarious than what it appeared to be. They also took a screenshot when they were trying to get rid of juror number 1 again, who it was, as a matter of fact, it was at that particular time is when I found out that he was not juror number 7, but in fact, juror number 1, when they were trying to get rid of him. And also in that motion, they're showing a picture of Jack Kowalski looking back this way and said, he's looking at his agent de facto, the notorious Jules, okay, what they failed to show, which thank goodness when Mr. Anderson, rebutted that motion and actually showed the picture in its entirety. When Jack Kowalski was doing this was me with my notepad. I didn't even know that took place. Okay. Dr. Scott Richards was sitting next to me. And Dr. Joe, that he was a big part of this case, and huge part. And if Jack Kowalski was looking at anyone. It was him and not me. And the false narrative that has been put out there, and where these people came up with these ideas, and it's so laughable that we can make a comedy out of it, was that, oh, juror 1 spoke to his wife spoke to me, then I spoke to Jack, and then Jack gave me messages that I in turn gave to the wife, and then the wife went to the juror. I mean, how insane. It's so insane that they came up with this, and they showed the judge just that little window that looked bad instead of giving the entire picture of what really went on. And that's sad.
Well, Kurt, I'm about to risk Jules's head exploding live on the live stream, asking a question from Lacey Ann. This is not my question, but Lacey Ann asked this. I got to know Jules's response to the newest rumor that she is Jack's girlfriend. Lacey Ann, there's your answer right there.
This is a disgrace. I can't believe that. Okay, Lacey Ann, I'm gonna.
He is rich, man. You know.
I'm gonna behave on this, but Lacey Ann, come on now. Let's. First of all, that question. I'm not going to say what I'm going to say. I will say, first off, I didn't even know that there was a rumor like that. Jack, I know you're probably watching this, or you're going to catch it on the rewatch. Dude, my friend, I'm so sorry. I have no idea where these people come up with this stuff. I could only suspect it's that outer limit internet thing, but no, I am not Jack's girlfriend. I'm no one's girlfriend. I am single. I plan on staying that way. I know that Jack is also single. He has no time for a girlfriend because he's too busy raising. And yes, you may say, well, they're teenagers now. You never stop raising your children, no matter how old they are. You're always there to do things. Please, whoever started that rumor, or whoever sees that rumor, either ignore it or put a stop to it. It's like the most asinine question I think I have been asked throughout this case.
Well, Lacey Ann, that certainly got Jules wound up. Jules off the rail. Thank you, Nancy McCarthy. Oh my goodness. Jules, you're my friend. I had to see it. I just had to see it. I knew how you would respond. Sorry to put you through that.
I don't even want to know where. I don't even want to know where the rumor is. But I assure you, it's a rumor.
Well, okay, so we'll file that into, as Kurt would say, asked and answered. Nancy, LEB, could you please pass on my love to Jack, Maya, and Kyle from Australia? Consider it done, LEB. Jennifer C., which breakfast company location is better, Sarasota or Bradenton? I will tell you that all 3 locations do a pretty terrific job, and I'm actually hoping to be pouring some coffee there later this week. I am going to ask all the advocates who are dialed in right now to please say a prayer for my family, my wife's family. We had an unexpected loss this week. My very healthy 55-year-old brother-in-law was found down and unresponsive, and we lost him this week. He is the father of 3 amazing kids, one of whom is the genius who's really driving the success of the breakfast company. In many ways, Dimitri learned to, the restaurant business at Nick's side, and he will be missed. But please, I know my family right now is going through a lot, dealing with his very sudden and unexpected loss. A healthy 55-year-old man who ate smartly and lived a healthy lifestyle. But so please keep Triple G's family in your prayers. It was a shocking loss. Yes, Jules.
As I told you last night, I'm very sorry for your loss, and I'm
Thank you.
Patty, and what you failed to mention is that this is Patty's twins, the father of her twin children, and it is a very sad day, and it's a lesson, because 55 is young, very young, and none of us know what tomorrow's going to bring. We're not promised tomorrow. So all of these, like this case right here, all of this catcalling and attacking one another just because you're on opposite sides of the fence. Please, people, show more grace in your life, because we don't know how long we're here for.
Yeah. And my message to everybody would be, hug your loved ones. Hug your loved ones. Never miss an opportunity to tell them how you feel. But thank you for that, and I appreciate all the kind words, thoughts, and prayers in the chat. Thank you so much. Jules, who will play you in the film?
What?
Who? Choose your actress. Who's going to play you?
Fran Drescher.
I love it. Those who don't recognize the name, she played the nanny. I think that's a great choice. That's a great choice. Yeah. Let me see.
I think George Clooney for Dr. Corcoran.
I don't. Actually, my wife thinks it's Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights. But
absolutely, I love him. Oh, yes.
Yeah. We addressed, Kurt, what kind of sanctions could be ordered. This is interesting. If JHatch is stuck in the mandated reporting issue, what's their take on their own staff not reporting coworkers for abuse? That sounds like the kind of topic we'd need to have in the evening so that we can justify having adult beverages, because that's a deep philosophical conversation, isn't it, Kurt?
Yeah, it also is tricky in legal communities as well for reporting, and when you do or do not report, it gets tricky, especially as they're your friends and colleagues, and it's like it's all that balance of the philosophy. It's like, when do you not, when do you punish the doctor, when do you not? Is it a mistake? Is it more? It's very, very tricky on a first principle.
Yeah. If an appeal is successful, wouldn't the plaintiffs have a right to the IJ since it was ordered?
Well, I mean, they have the right to the IJ the whole time, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Except it was, the IJ was initially kept out, and because the hospital had convinced the court that it was restricted only to the Heart Institute, and again, as I explained in my testimony, the Heart Institute issues was why the surveyors, the regulators came in and looked. But just like firefighters coming to put out a kitchen fire, they're going to look beyond that at all the risk factors that caused the fire. And so when regulators and surveyors come in, yes, you called them for this, but they're going to look at the whole global environment. And that's what the IJ really pointed to, were the cultural issues, the retaliation and the retribution against whistleblowers. If you spoke up at your own peril and at your own risk. It looked at the governance structure that was just number one, it was an outlier for the Hopkins system. Number two, it was just, there were so many holes and gaps in communication and the way that information wasn't shared, all of which discussed in my testimony. But, I think that perhaps, I know that had I gotten involved earlier, before the decision was made about keeping the IJ out, I think had I been involved earlier, maybe I could have shared some perspectives with Greg and Nick that would have helped them win that argument, that would have made the IJ part of the conversation earlier. But I do agree that if, God forbid, this has to be retried, I think that the IJ comes in much earlier. Just want to thank Annalee Finch for the super sticker, as well as others. But hey, guys, listen, I think we're 2.5 hours in. I know that everybody's got days to get to, and want to cut everybody loose so you can get to this. We've got a beautiful but cold day here in Tampa. Excuse me. And I am getting over this respiratory crud that has been a problem.
I don't believe
thank God. No, I am. I really am getting over it. Charlie Lynn, thank you for much love from South Dakota. It's minus 14 degrees. Oh, good Lord, without the wind chill today. Keep warm, everyone. The great news warms my heart for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. It has been an exceptional pleasure, Kurt, having you surprise us and join us. Thank you so much for jumping in and bringing
it's a pleasure to get to talk to you. Make
uncivil law perspective. And hey, and we got to wish you a belated happy birthday. But thank you for joining us. And Jules, it was nice to kind of hear who you are, because I know that you were very timid about saying anything that could further inflame the whole post-trial process. But again, yesterday was a big day.
Yes, I had, several people that were asking me, would I come on their YouTube channels and discuss it? And I was apprehensive because of the fallout. And so now I feel better about it, as I think Kurt would agree I should, right, Kurt?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could.
Great.
Yeah. So there you have it. And, and when Dr. Joe asked, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Who knows where I'm going to show up next? You never know. But anyway, yeah. And thank you, Dr. Joe. Thank you, everybody in the chat. There's still a whole lot more to be told, but we would be here all day, and that's not in the wheelhouse. But yeah, thank you, Dr. Joe.
You bet. Thank you so much for letting us see another side of the notorious P squared pro-plaintiff Jules. There is a lot more to this woman than the Hunter Shapiro team wants you to know. But she's fantastic, and she played an important role in helping us to understand what was going on inside the courtroom, with her reports to Scott at Recovery Addict and others. Scott, thank you. I know I saw that Mrs. RA is in the chat now, but Scott, thank you for joining us briefly. I know that you were on a car trip today, but thank you for pulling off to the side and joining us briefly. Want to thank Candace and Judy Lynn, who have been moderating a very active chat today. Thank you so much for all the work that you do to help me bring this content forward. And thank you to all the advocates who got up early, the Europeans who got to enjoy it in real time and not miss out on sleep, and to the folks from Australia and New Zealand who joined the early part at the wee small hours of the morning, I salute you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of the of what we are trying to accomplish as advocates. I will tell you that coming up in the next week, I am working on the logistics of sitting down with Maya, Jack, and Kyle. I'm also working on the logistics of sitting down with Paul and Yoli, juror 1 and hippo lover. Also Paul has also reached out to some of the other jurors, and I'd love to have the jurors and the alternates to hear about the experience. It was an extraordinary experience being in the courtroom, but to have such a vital role as a juror, I'd love to hear what that was like. I'd love to hear from one of the alternates that sat through 8 or 9 weeks of testimony and didn't get to vote. We could talk about that for an hour. We've got some really cool content coming up ahead, and we're also going to be pivoting to talk more about advocacy. I have a phenomenal story that I want to share about a young lady who surprised her mom and her doctor and advocated for herself and credited this community for giving her that strength and giving her that insight. So yeah, really super cool story. So anyway, a lot of cool stuff coming up ahead. And I'm excited to know how many folks in this group are in for the long haul. I'm super excited about it. But I am grateful to each of you for all the work that you are doing in taking care of Maya. But as I always like to remind you, yes, Jules.
Listen, there is a question in the chat that's bothersome for me, and I would just like to address it before we sign off. And Kurt is probably the better one to answer this. It's by Chris H, and it says, if Jules wants to go to the next trial, could she be banned from the courtroom by the defense? By the way, I will be in the courtroom for the Petito case, but Kurt, please answer that question.
Public trials are open to the public in a public way, and Jules, as a member of the public, is allowed to attend public trials unless she's disruptive or a witness. So no, she can't be banned. Thanks.
Now, if Jules shows up with Yoli, with hippo lover, you might see some heads explode. But again, I think Kurt would represent her if anyone tried to stop them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, I love you guys. I think Dr. Joe has the best advocate ever. So, if you like this video, make sure you hit like, share it out to your social medias. And even when the stream ends, please leave a comment below. And don't forget, follow Kurt on civil law because he is uncivil.
And don't forget to follow Jules on TikTok. What's the name of your site?
Blind_gossip, and I may be going live today. We'll see.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, everyone. Make sure that you take care of yourself so that we can be taking care of others. I'll look forward to seeing you in the coming days. Again, Kurt, Jules, thank you so much for making this a very dynamic conversation today. I'm grateful for your help.
Take
care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.